Hello, hello. How are you all? I am so excited to be here because we are going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is risk. All right. So let's dig in and talk about risk. For those of us, all of us who are entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship is a risky adventure, right? Like there's no doubt about that. There are no guarantees in what you're doing. And for many of us entrepreneurs, we are out on our own, right? Like we're armed with a dream, with some ideally marketable skills, and a healthy risk tolerance because you need to have some level of risk tolerance to actually do entrepreneurship, to be in it, right? And we're often working against the grain, trying to build something that not everyone else agrees with or even understands. So there is risk, right? So, welcome back to the Impact and Action Weekly Live Show, where we talk about mindset shifts and tactical approaches to help you put your impact in action. And I am Maryann Lombardi. I am the founder and CEO of Maryann Lombardi Coaching. I help women and non binary entrepreneurs build wealth and independence so that they can take the bold action that's necessary to build a business that is in alignment with the life that they want to live. So I have a pretty high tolerance for risk, and I'm not sure if it's due to nature or nurture, but I have always been interested in the unknown, right? Trying new things or stepping up to the edge of the cliff, which always terrified my parents because I just wanted to be right there, right? Like we travel and go places in the summer, and I wanted to be right up on the edge of that cliff and look over because I just wanted to see what was there. So. Um, so risk is something that I have always had a fascination with. So to start with, let's define what risk is in the first place. And risk is the exposure of the possibility of something unpleasant or unwelcome happening, right? Something that could cause harm or damage. So risk requires you to engage with the unknown, to take an action without knowing the outcome. And although risk is defined as the exposure to something harmful, the truth is the outcome of whatever feels risky could also be amazing. So let's dig into three keys to understanding and navigating risk. And the first thing that we have to know is that risk is all about fear, right? To navigate risk requires us to have a healthy relationship and a decent conversation with our fear. Because when we are afraid, we will do almost anything to avoid or postpone, hide, or stop that feeling, right? We'll take or not take all sorts of actions to avoid that fear. Now, fear is universal, right? We all feel fear. Fear arises when we feel some kind of threat, right? That could be a physical, a mental, emotional threat. And that fear is there to help us, right? It's there to help us prepare to deal with some oncoming harm. So, fear plays a big role in risk and can keep entrepreneurs from taking action if it is unchecked. So, fear may start in our mind, but it is something that is felt all over our body, right? It makes us feel nervous. It can cause an upset stomach. It can increase our heart rate or even make it hard for us to sleep. And so many more things. So, the more we hide from or avoid our fears, the longer we sit in the physical and the mental impacts of that fear. And often, the longer we take avoiding taking action to build our business or reach our goals or change our life. So, fear is a powerful tool for us. Yes, it protects us from harm, and it is our friend, it is not our enemy. It is there and to present us with this beautiful opportunity to check in on our wants and our needs and to face them head on, right? And to better understand what's going on for us when we feel that. So therefore, we really need to give our fear attention, right? We need to sit in it and own it and like grab a cup of coffee or a cocktail with it and like sit down and learn about our fear. So, our inability to take a risk often comes down to our fear of the outcome. And we have a negativity bias, right? We're always thinking about the worst case scenario. Now, this isn't always bad, right? It can help us regulate the options and weigh the pros and cons of taking an action. If you ask yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen if I take this action? Can I handle that worst thing? But often when we're having that conversation with ourselves, we forget to ask, what if the best thing happens, right? Like, what if the best thing happens? Can I handle that as well? Which is a really powerful thing. If you are used to asking yourself, which I am, I'm always used to asking myself when something comes up, I go, what is the worst thing that can happen? And then I run down what those worst things are. And then I go, okay, so can I handle that thing? What would I do if that thing happened, if that worst thing happened? But I've started recently asking the other question, what would happen if the best thing happened? Right? What is the best thing that could happen? And can I handle that? And you'd be surprised because sometimes those best things are like, ooh, shit. Like I never thought about that. So we need to look at the potential for the negative outcome and the positive outcome and make our decisions to face those fears and take a risk based on that. So the second piece of this conversation around understanding and navigating risk is recognizing that the risk of inaction is higher than the cost of action, right? So again, risk defined is it exposes you to the possibility of something unpleasant or unwelcome to happen, something that could cause harm or damage. So often we think of risks as the big changes that we're making and the actions that we take that lead us into the unknown, to the things that include uncertainty and the unknown outcomes that happen after taking action. But there is an even bigger risk, and that risk is of not doing anything, right? Of not taking action. So there's a potential cost associated to the actions we take and the actions we don't take. So we're often hyper aware of the cost of action, or at least we think we are, but we don't consider the cost of inaction, right? Like we don't consider that. So, for example, if there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be, not taking action and remaining where you are costs you dearly, right? If you're unsatisfied with your work, it costs you in unearned salary or revenue. It costs you in leadership opportunities. It costs you in the benefits of being challenged and inspired by your work, right? So even if you are unsatisfied with your life, right, by not acting to change that to the point of being satisfied with your life, it is costing you the time and attention that you are not spending on your personal relationships or on the activities that would make your life meaningful. It's costing you the mental and emotional and physical stress that comes along with not living the life that you want. So the cost of inaction is higher than the cost of action. And best-selling author Dan Pink has a relatively new book out called The Power of Regret, How Looking Back Moves Us Forward. And he discovered through these thousands or tens of thousands of responses to these questionnaires and research about regret that there are 4 types of regrets. There are foundation regrets, which are not building the proper foundation, right? Like not working hard in school, not taking care of your health or saving money. There are moral regrets, when you have a moral, like when you're at a moral junction or something and you choose the wrong thing instead of the right one. Then there's connection regrets, which are about not staying in contact with people that you care about or maintaining meaningful connections. But the other one is boldness regrets, that you didn't take a chance, that you were not bold enough to do that thing that you wanted, whether that was starting a business, whether that was asking a person out, right? That you didn't take the risk, that you weren't bold enough to take the action. So even in that research, it's clear that the cost of inaction leads to deep regrets globally, right? So we want to try to shift your focus on risk of not taking the action instead of the risk of taking the action and say, yes, right? Take action so you don't end up having a bunch of those bold regrets. So, excuse me. So the third thing to keep in mind is not everything is a failure, right? Not everything that doesn't work out is a failure. So I'm a huge advocate of rolling back the excessive use of the word failure because it feels like in the lexicon of entrepreneurship, the word failure is sort of a massive word that is used all the time. And as entrepreneurs, we are constantly in the state of putting something out in the world, right? For others to see, to engage with, to buy, right? And we work incredibly hard to do this. And the risk of it working or not, and there's a risk of it working and not working. And that is a vulnerable and rewarding process that requires a lot of learning and a lot of trial and error. So most of that process does not include failure. But there is this common narrative of winning and losing that is attached to the game of entrepreneurship. So when we don't win, we must be losing. And I don't find that kind of binary nature of the narrative useful. Yes, sometimes there are big fails and big wins, but most of the work lives in the middle. It is about testing and retesting. It is about serving and learning and then testing and retesting again. So let's talk about the word failure, right? Because the words we use matter, and the impact, how we feel about ourselves when we use those words are key. So I've always hated the word failure. And maybe that's because I never want to think about failing or something like that. But because failing like sucks, right? Like it feels terrible. It just feels really shitty when you fail. It like affects your entire body and your mind and your spirit when you fail. So I went back and I looked at the definition of failure. Again, we always assume we know what these words mean because we use them constantly. And I went back and I read it again, and this is the definition of failure. It means a lack of success, being an unsuccessful person or enterprise or thing. It means negligence, a breakdown, a collapse. So no wonder it feels shitty, right? Like who wants to feel like an unsuccessful, negligent person who has caused the breakdown of something that they care very deeply about? So the words we use matter. They impact how we feel again about ourselves and what we're doing. And that word, the word failure, feels crappy. So most of what we do as entrepreneurs requires us to test and retest our ideas, our content, and our products. It requires research, but it mostly requires action, and that takes risk. We have to do the action to know what is working. And we have to put stuff out there to see whether or not people want it. When something does not work out, we have to assess that and then we have to try it again. That process is not about winning and losing. It's about testing and retesting. So we need to roll back the use of the word failure. Not everything that doesn't work is a failure. And save it, if you have to, for actual failures. Stop telling entrepreneurs that they need to fail fast or get over their fails quickly, and stop trying to redefine the word failure as some sort of empowering word, because it's not an empowering word. It feels shitty and it means something like very negative. So as we move forward to navigate risks that come up for you, I want to make sure that you, one, develop a healthy relationship with your fear, right? Take it out for a beer, get to know them. You may not always like what they have to say, but it is important to listen, and to learn from those fears. Next thing is when you find yourself asking, what is the worst thing that can happen? If you take that risk, follow that up with what is the best thing that could happen if I take that risk. The other thing is to develop a bias for action over inaction, right? Understand that the longer you don't act, that you don't take risks, that you don't act to build your business or change your life, it costs you, and it costs you dearly. And recognize that those risks that you take and the actions that follow, if they don't work out how you expected them, that doesn't mean they were a failure. And it doesn't mean that you are a failure. You are testing and retesting. You are exploring and you are learning, and then you are testing and retesting again. So I hope this helped you understand a little bit more about risk and how to navigate risk. So I would love for you to, in the comments, let me know whether that this was helpful. Let me know whether there was anything in there that made you rethink the way you look at risk. And I would love to know, what is the biggest risk that you are sitting with right now, right? Is there something on your mind? Is there something that you're sitting with going, oh, I don't know, should I do that thing? I don't know if I want to do that thing. It feels really risky. Let me know in the comments. I'd be curious. And as always, thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.